Welcome to the FitnessFest podcast. My name is Tyler Valencia. I'm the president of KIPS and Time to Train Fitness. We have a great episode for you today. We have Kim Gray, who is a senior master trainer for Yogafit and the brand manager. First of all, Kim, thank you for coming on the episode.
Thank you, Tyler, for having me.
Yes, let's kick this one off with the question that everybody starts with to kind of set the foundation for this episode and kind of give our listeners an idea of who you are, where you came from, and all that kind of stuff. So can you share your story in the fitness industry, a little bit of background information on Kim before you started working with Yogafit?
Sure. Like probably most people in the fitness industry, I love fitness. I love working out. And I really enjoy group fitness classes. That's where I got my start. I began doing Group X back in the day at a local fitness club. And I was hooked. I did classes like 5-6 days a week. I knew all the routines by heart, the music. And I just thought, wouldn't it be great to actually be an instructor? And so I pursued Group X training, and I started teaching step aerobics and body sculpting, boot camps, and things like that. And I was loving it. At the same time, I was also I had a full-time job working for a software company. So group fitness and my fitness career was kind of my side hustle before the word side hustle was popular, right? So I've been side hustling fitness for a long time.
Nice. With getting that kind of spark within the group fitness realm and kind of being like, okay, I feel like I can do this. Was there a point where you're like, okay, what are my next steps? I feel like that's often a point. Did you have that and you're like, okay, where do I start looking?
Well, so I was employed by a local group fitness studio here where I live. And I was teaching maybe 4 or so classes a week. And one day the owner of that studio approached me and she said that she had the opportunity to buy a Christian fitness certifying business that she had been a student of, and she wanted to do it, but she wanted to divest the group fitness studio and asked me if I wanted to buy it.
Wow.
And so I decided to do that. So I became the owner of a group fitness studio, and that also had a small gymnastics business in it, a small martial arts business in it, and tanning beds. Oh. So I bought this fitness business, and I continued to work my software job while trying to get this, manage this group fitness business. So for a while, I was burning the candles at both ends.
Definitely.
I eventually divested. I sold the tanning beds to another tanning place in town. The gymnastics business, I kept that for a few years and decided that wasn't really my jam. And I sold that to a dance studio here in town. And the martial arts business, that kind of self-ran. It was a friend of mine who was doing it. So that just stayed there. And they had martial arts during times that we weren't holding group classes.
Nice.
Yeah. So I had a staff of about maybe 5 other instructors, and we offered classes 6 days a week. And it was good for a while until the economy tanked. And, at that point, everybody was getting paid except for me. Oh. So, the bills all got paid and the instructors all got paid, but this girl wasn't getting paid. And I'm married, and my husband was getting frustrated with that whole, you are working for no financial gain. And, so when our landlord wanted to raise the rent, the lease was coming due and the landlord wanted the rent to go up. My husband said, this just can't, we just can't keep doing this. So I decided to let the lease go and we were living in a large house that had a big walkout basement. So where I live, we have basements, and walkout basements have, doors and windows.
Mm-hmm.
And so we invested a little bit of money for an outside stairway to make this beautiful open space, which was supposed to be a family room, but we weren't using it, into a small yoga studio.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the business kind of transformed into a home-based business. So my husband gave me 6 months, or I think he gave me a year, to pay back with profit the money that we invested in updating the house. And we did
Mm-hmm.
landscaping and outdoor lighting and stuff to make it safe for people to, enter.
Mm-hmm.
And it was paid back in 3 months.
Wow.
So finally, I started then making money. And people would come and, they'd come to my house and we would do these classes. They held about 12 people.
Mm.
And so I then was the only instructor. I taught yoga, and I taught Zumba, and I taught step aerobics, and I taught boot camps. So I still taught that group X stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually my body began telling me that I was going to need to give up some of those bigger workouts. I developed runner's knee, which I don't run. So my knees started feeling the impact every time I did a step class, every time I did a Zumba class. Mm-hmm. So I had to let those disciplines go, as much as I hated to do it. And honestly, it took a long time to let that go. And I think other people listening to this can probably appreciate it. We love teaching those things, and it also keeps us in shape.
Yeah. So
I was a little worried that, I'm giving up cardio workouts. How is that going? How is that going to change my fitness? Mm-hmm. So, but I still teach one boot camp style class a week. Just can't let that go. And I also teach a yoga strength class, which also gets the heart rate up. So I'm lifting weights a couple times a week. Got that one boot camp class, and then I cycle. So I don't do spin classes. I just cycle. So that's worked really well. And now I teach probably 5 yoga classes a week through my home-based yoga business.
Wow. Very interesting. I'm going to go back to when your business kind of shifted there, and talking about the economy, and the joke, or even the part that I got to chime in on, was that's actually when I entered the fitness industry. And I just remember that first year that a lot of the coworkers that I had at the gym, and I started working when my first job was a big facility that had 40 plus trainers, humongous, 2 basketball courts, 2 pools, one of those types of gyms. And I just remember constantly instructors being like, oh man, before the economy, we were making this. And before the economy, like, oh, my commissions were XYZ. And I'm just like, what? I want those commissions. I want those big paychecks. But
right.
those were already gone. But with thinking about even shifting, because that was a shift back then, you shifted your business, and it'd be interesting now to hear, how did your business and your businesses and what you do with Yogafit, and even what you do in person at your home base, how has that changed over the last year?
Well, even before that, it's really interesting. A couple years before the pandemic, I'd had this home-based business in this, studio in my house that I had created, that after 7 years, one of my neighbors, the one who lived right across the street, decided that he didn't like the business being there anymore. And so he was successful in getting my business removed, which was, it was quite a sad thing for me. Our neighborhood covenants allowed the business to be there. And that's what I had looked at before I decided to do that. And thought, okay, neighborhood covenants say it's okay. And this was the neighborhood had large lot sizes. So there was lots of space between homes. Driveways were big. I could park 12 cars on the driveway, right? So there wasn't real issue with parking. He just didn't like it if anybody parked in the street, which isn't illegal, but he just, that just really irritated him. So I asked all my clients, please park in the driveway. I know it's a little inconvenient. When you can't just pull away, you got to wait for somebody else to back out, but everybody was cool with it. My prices are, I had my prices reasonable so that, people would, they would be okay with those inconveniences. So, but every once in a while, somebody would park in the street and he didn't like it. So he called the county. The county said, hey, you can't have the business there. And I had no idea because my neighborhood covenant said it was okay. So then I had to move it. So then fortunately, I didn't want to take on a lease again, right? I'd had a lease with that brick and mortar. I didn't want to have to do that again. So I found a venue place. So there are lots of venues out there in the world that have nice spaces that want to, host parties and weddings and meetings and things like that. And there's a beautiful space here in my town that's used to be an old car dealer. And the building is built in the 60s. So beautiful, mid-century modern building, windows floor to ceiling on two sides of it, and they rent that space out. So I called them and I said, would you be interested in, letting me lease on a per class basis the space? And they primarily lease it out on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But I teach my classes Monday through Thursday. And so that arrangement has worked really well. And I was so grateful then when the pandemic rolled around, because then, we couldn't have in-person classes for a while. And of course they couldn't have meetings, receptions, any of that stuff. So then when last March rolled around, March 2020, like everybody else, I decided to start teaching virtually. And I went to Facebook Live for 2 weeks until I got my Zoom account set up. And then I just went full on all my schedule on Zoom.
Nice.
Bought some lighting, bought a headset, bought a camera. And that's how I weathered the storm. My students were about 50% of them wanted to do virtual. Some didn't have any interest in that, or they didn't have the technology to do it. But I continued to teach classes, and one of my classes has not gone back to being in person. They wanted to stay virtual. I'm like, all right, that's fine. I don't have to pay rent then. And we just do it all online. But right now I teach in person and virtually at the same time. So some folks are like, hey, I just kind of like this doing it from my house, even though you're teaching in person again. So I just do that all at the same time.
Yeah.
It works.
I agree with that. And that's like when we start talking about in person or at home. And what I always come back to, and I have to preface this by saying that I've always had a home gym growing up. I remember when I was in middle school, my dad bought a bench and made this little home gym in our garage. And so I've always been used to that. And at different spots growing up, and over the last 10 years, I've always had some type of home gym. And I have to also say that excludes the time that we lived in a very small condo. But when we moved out to where we are now outside of Phoenix, home gym was always at. So I was kind of set up for it as well. But for what you were mentioning about spaces, that was such an interesting part because I did something similar when I used to run a in-person boot camp back when this was 2012 to 2016. And that last year of running it, I did something similar where I found a business. And when we were running our boot camp, it was early in the morning. It was a 5:30 a.m. boot camp. And so that was a time where they didn't have martial arts classes at this local indoor place. And the reason why I looked for it was getting towards those cold months where in the morning it's just chilly and nobody wants to work out outside, even though the dedicated folks that wake up for 5:30 a.m., they will often do it. A indoor facility that has lights or it's a little bit warmer, bathroom, all that kind of stuff. they are much more inclined for it. And so I made a deal with the martial arts facility. And of course, there were set rules in terms of shoes off and other things, just making sure you clean up after. But it worked very well in terms of the hours matching up when they weren't there. And as long as you have that relationship where it works, I think that that's such a great idea for people to think about as people are looking for ideas for their business moving forward into finish 2021 or 2022. Maybe thinking about if they're outdoors, coming indoors, finding a facility just like how you did. And if the hours match up and being creative with it, it can work. And people might like that a little bit more. Just throwing that out there. But with your virtual workouts, was there kind of a learning curve for you in terms of setting things up and improving the video quality, microphone? Did you find that pretty difficult?
Well, I figured out right away that, using Facebook Live wasn't going to be the ideal. So I appreciated the technology that Zoom offered. And I've got a decent camera on my computer. I've got a MacBook Pro, but I decided to go with a camera that I did research, best camera for recording fitness classes. Mm-hmm. And I went with a Logitech Brio, which was recommended. It was a few $100s. Mm-hmm. And I had to wait for it a little bit because everybody else had that same idea too, right? Mm-hmm. So these were sold out for about a month or so. But when I got it, it does improve the quality of the picture. Mm-hmm. And in terms of a microphone, at first I tried to do my boot camp class with music, but people were saying it's hard to hear the music. I can't hear your voice. And so I ended up going with a wireless headset. Mm-hmm. And so the quality of the sound is better, but then they really can't hear the music. So I tell folks, well, put your own music on, and for yoga as well, because the feedback has been, we'd rather hear your voice than the music. Mm-hmm. So that's how I've solved that issue. And it wasn't much of a learning curve. And I found that I'm getting, like all of us who are doing virtual, we're getting pretty used to teaching to a screen. Mm-hmm. Instead of teaching to people, right? So I found the first time that I did a live class after being virtual for 3 or more months, there was a little bit of was a learning curve trying to do both, trying to teach in person again and virtually at the same time. So it took a couple of classes to feel comfortable doing that. But now it feels normal.
Yeah. I kind of equate that to whenever I get back into teaching. So when I moved out to where I live now, outside of Phoenix, there was an opportunity to do some training with some athletes, and I moved out here, and I was not planning on training anybody. I stopped it quite a bit ago, but a buddy of mine asked, "Hey, can you help my team?" And there was that period, that initial first couple of days, just getting back into the swing of it and remembering the little nuances of how you train people or the environment that you're training them. And both of those apply to live or virtual. And one of the things that I talk with instructors with my company, Time to Train Fitness, is with virtual, you're often trying to hit every type of learning experience for the individual on the other end. You're making sure you're giving visual cues, auditory cues, and visual cues so they could see you while you're talking. And often you have to do a lot of it throughout it because you don't know the other person on the other end and where they are at and how they experience the class may be different than somebody else. So you got to make sure you're doing a lot of it at the same time consistently. And with that being said, it's not where you're in person where you can show it, explain it, show it again, and then work with your client to maneuver them into those positions, and you can kind of sit back with it. And I saw that kind of learning phase for some instructors at the beginning where they would say an exercise and they would kind of just stand there on camera and you're just like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah, right.
what's going on here? But it's one of those unique things with yoga specifically. Do you find yourself doing the whole class the whole time?
I do the whole class the whole time now. I've always done group X and yoga. And so when you're teaching group X, you are doing the workout the whole time, right? So if you're teaching a boot camp class, I do it with them. If I was teaching step or Zumba, I'd be doing it the whole time. So my whole fitness background has been, I'm doing it with the students.
Yeah.
Now in yoga, depending upon the class I'm leading, I used to, we would do some of it together and then I would walk around the room. And I had to stop doing that, of course, when we went virtual, right? And then you have to do, and I knew right away, you're going to have to do everything the whole time, right? Everything that you're cueing, you are doing. But that wasn't a big stretch for me since I was already doing it on the Group X side. But the thing that I miss is when I'm teaching yoga in person, I do enjoy walking around the room. And but now that I'm recording, if people sign up to take the class virtually or they want a recording of it, then I have to stay on my mat and do the whole class. But every once in a while, it might be a class where no one has shown up and to watch it virtually and no one has requested a recording. So then I'll say, yay, nobody's here for the recording. And then I get to leave my mat. And that makes me feel happy. It feels like, really feels like normal.
Yeah.
So, because I do enjoy moving off the mat and going to one end of the room, especially if they're facing the long edge of the mat, right? I'll go and then face them. So, I find that enjoyable, getting to leave the mat from time to time.
Yeah, I bet. And you talked briefly about this already with now the last year with teaching virtually, having to demonstrate the whole class with your body and recovery. Did you find that the recovery was enough? I've spoken with some instructors before where they started teaching more over the last year when teaching virtually, doing more classes, and they found that they had to actually cut back on some of it because they were not getting enough recovery and the fact that they were having to do the whole class the whole time. Did you find that with your own body?
Well, the good news is that most of the stuff that I teach is yoga. So I'm not finding that I'm overdoing it most of the time.
Gotcha.
But I did do a couple of 8-week long weight loss type of virtual workshops. And I've done a couple of those. And so that had me working out more. And so, yes, for a period when I was doing those, I was getting a little extra workout. So I found I had to use therapy balls and be more mindful with my own body.
Yeah.
Really, there was the therapy balls and the foam rolling, that stuff. I had to take extra time for myself to bring my body back into a balanced state.
Makes sense. And now with the podcast episode, it's time that we get into a little discussion on Yogafit. Can you explain your role with Yogafit and kind of what you do with them?
Sure. So my first role with Yogafit was actually a student. I was a student and I got my the majority of my yoga education through Yogafit. The school has a 200-hour teacher training, a 300-hour teacher training, which is advanced, and then a yoga therapy program. So I've been through the entire program, and I'm a yoga therapist as well as a yoga teacher. So that was my first role with them. And I guess it's been 4 years ago now. I started offering, hey, I've got a business background, and could you use some help, right? So I came on as their trade show coordinator, and so it's that role, Tyler, that I've met you. So I handle our Yogafit's participation in trade shows, fitness conferences, things like that. So I did that part-time, and then that morphed into some greater responsibilities, and I eventually became the brand manager. And I skipped over the part though. Before that, it's been 7 years ago, I became a master trainer for Yogafit. So I decided that it would enhance my career to get out in the world and start teaching teachers how to teach yoga. And since Yogafit had been such a big part of my yoga path, and I love the brand, the teachings, firmly believe in it. It's safe, effective yoga for everybody. I went through their apprentice program and became a master trainer. And so I have traveled all over the US and even internationally to teach Yogafit teacher trainings. I've been blessed to go to Italy.
Oh, wow.
I've gone to Germany. I've gone to Taiwan.
Wow.
And up into Canada to teach teacher trainings. And then I went with Yogafit, not to teach, but I went with them over to India in 2018 to the birthplace of yoga. So that's been part of my journey as well. Wow. So yeah, I've been really blessed to get some international travel in that role with Yogafit.
Yeah, I bet.
So I do that part-time, and then my full-time job now is being their brand manager. So doing marketing, newsletters, social media, just managing all that stuff. The trade shows are part of that. So truly now yoga is my full-time job.
With Yogafit, and just for the listeners that are unfamiliar with it, can you give a general background on the company as a whole and the courses offered?
Yeah, sure. So the founder of Yogafit is Beth Shaw. You guys might be familiar with her. She began teaching Yogafit style back in the 1990s. So she got a traditional yoga teacher training. And she was living in LA and she loves to work out. So she decided to offer yoga in the gym where she was working out. And she figured out pretty quickly that the way she had been taught to teach yoga didn't really work well with folks that spent a lot of time working out in a gym, bodies that are muscular, but parts of them are tight. The environment, not very yogic in terms of there's, fluorescent lighting and lots of noise, people pumping weight nearby. And so she decided that she would take the teachings that she knew, and she would put them in a group X style of format, right? So there's a warm up, a work phase, and a cool down. And she began teaching yoga in that way, also incorporating fitness types of exercises like some abdominal work into the practice. And it really took off. People really loved it. And in 1997, Beth held the first Yogafit yoga teacher training. Wow. And so gradually the trainings increased in terms of content. At first it was a 2-day, here's how to teach Yogafit kind of training. But during that time, the idea of a 200-hour more comprehensive yoga teacher training program came about. And so Yogafit added content to make a 200-hour program. And then eventually a 500-hour program for advanced yoga teacher training occurred. And so then we added on. And so our 200 and 500-hour program is like you would see at other yoga teacher training programs. It's basically, how to teach yoga. You learn poses, learn how to cue, learn how to communicate, learn about hands-on adjustments, learn about special populations, learn about, medical conditions and contraindications. So it's a really good foundation of yoga teacher training. And then in the advanced programs, you might learn trauma-informed yoga for certain medical conditions, nervous system disorders, diabetes, heart health, pranayama techniques, more advanced meditation techniques. Yoga philosophy, of course, is all part of that as well. And so you get a really nice foundation. And then that 500-hour program can also then be the foundation for yoga therapy, which is another probably 400 or 500 hours on top of that. That prepares you for working one-on-one with someone. Yoga as therapy, I kind of think it's like personal training, but from a yoga perspective, but also with groups of people as well. So for someone that's interested in a maybe a full-time career teaching yoga or being a yoga therapist, I'd highly encourage looking into a yoga therapy program.
Wow. What's actually very enlightening for me, and I will admit that I'm not well versed in the yoga realm. I, of course, have taken a couple classes by this time. With my time in the industry, I'm going on, let me think, my 12th year. So I should have taken a class. I know the general basics, but I've always kind of wondered more about the differences in the 200-hour, 500-hour, if it's all hands-on, if it's educational based. And so you given a little background on the differences in the courses offered through Yogafit right there. That was very enlightening for me. I did not know that type of information. And is that typically industry standard in terms of yoga certifications, the difference between a 200-hour and a 500-hour?
Yeah, so there's a kind of a governing body of yoga teachers and schools. It's called Yoga Alliance, and they have a registry of yoga teachers. So someone who's gone through a 200-hour program can be registered, can be a yoga teacher on the Yoga Alliance registry. And at the same time, they have standards for schools. So Yogafit, has to meet the standards that are put forth by Yoga Alliance for a registered yoga school, right? And so they have standards for how much experience that the trainers or the teachers at that school have to have in order to teach for this school, and then what the curriculum is. So there has to be a certain amount of anatomy. There has to be a certain amount of philosophy. There has to be a certain amount of, how to teach yoga training, right? So it's kind of like college, right? Where you get a degree, you have a certain number of hours in each of these areas of interest. So so Yoga Alliance puts those guidelines in place, and any school that's registered with Yoga Alliance must meet those guidelines, right, for 200 hours. And then they've got a separate set for 500 hours. Now, there's a separate governing body for yoga therapy. And so Yogafit is a Yoga Alliance registered yoga school for 200 and 500, but the separate body for yoga therapy is called the International Association of Yoga Therapists. And they have a very rigorous credentialing program. And so Yogafit is also credentialed by International Association of Yoga Therapists. So, which is an amazing program. And you really dive deep into yoga as a therapeutic tool for all kinds of diseases or diseases, right? It could be physical, it could be lifestyle related, it could be mental health related. So we've got a 3-module program for yoga therapy.
Wow.
That takes you through all of those areas. And then at the end, you can be a yoga therapist.
Wow. Okay.
Pretty detailed.
Yeah, very enlightening. I did not know the majority of that information. So it's great. It's great that I'm learning while I'm doing this podcast interview. And I always enjoy that aspect of these episodes, recording, meeting individuals in different areas of the industry. So awesome. With now talking about Yogafit and going into conferences and utilizing that as a tool, how does Yogafit utilize conferences? Because essentially with these, you get a period of time to instruct. Is there is it kind of an introduction to Yogafit and the style of teaching, and then they go off to hopefully do more instruction with the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we present at FitnessFest, for example, we want to offer courses that will appeal to the population. So the fitness instructors, right? So maybe you've got people that are doing group fitness or personal trainers that maybe think they want to start to incorporate yoga as part of their routines, right? So, I can speak from personal experience. Back when I was doing all the, body heavy workouts, I started recognizing I'm not going to be able to teach these things the rest of my life. And so then that's when I started my yoga education journey, because it takes a bit of time to get it. And with the Yogafit model, you can do it like a weekend at a time. Level 1 is 2 days, level 2 is 2 days, level 3 is 2 days, and so on. So you can spread it out. Right now, we also have virtual online intensives, and you can get it all done in 3 months. Oh, wow. I took 2.5 years to get through my 200-hour education, and another 2.5 years to get through my 500-hour education. So I like to spread it out so you can kind of digest it. Mm-hmm. But we're hoping that that folks that come to FitnessFest, kind of like me, want to add a little bit of yoga into personal training, for example. Nice. So we have a 1-day training, Yogafit for personal trainers, right? So that's a perfect fit, right? So you don't have to get a whole 200-hour education to be able to use yoga in personal training. You could take this 1-day training and you've got some tools to bring that in. But maybe you think, that was pretty cool. Maybe I'd like to get a little bit more. So you can take our 1-day, it's not 1-day, 2-day Yogafit level 1. It's foundational yoga teacher training. So you learn, 40 poses, basic things for how to teach yoga. And you can teach a level 1 class after that 2-day training. So we're looking for folks that are interested in adding yoga as a teaching discipline. And then they may decide that they just want to go on and get all that 200 hours.
That's great stuff. Great stuff right there. Now with the podcast, we're going to get into your advice part with where you've been, your background. And that's one of the beauties of this podcast, is that all the guests that come on, and it's true about anybody in the industry, everybody has a different experience. And with yours, with owning different businesses, doing at brick and mortars, doing at your home, doing virtual, working with a large organization like Yogafit, it's very different than many of the individuals out there. And what's great now is to ask you for advice for other fitness professionals, because that's really what I feel like most fit pros, once they get to a certain point where you can say, okay, wow, they're still in the fitness industry. They're still working at their craft. It's great to be able to share that with others. If you were entering the industry now, 2021, what was something that you wish you knew about the whole industry?
What do I wish I knew? That's an interesting question.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Well, so I guess I wish that I wouldn't have just, I took a deep dive in right away. Mm-hmm. Going from becoming a group fitness instructor, and then within a few years, I was owning a brick and mortar. Mm-hmm. And all that time, I was working another full-time job, and I was teaching a lot of classes. So I wish that I would have been a little bit kinder to myself in terms of the pace that I used to build, to transition into that side hustle, right? I went from 0 to 90, and I was at 90 for a while. And I was impatient, and I wanted to, catch up. I wanted to catch up with the industry. And so I spent a whole lot of time getting certifications. This was before my yoga education. I got this certification, and then I got this certification, and I got a whole bunch of certifications in a very short period of time. And I wish I just would have given myself permission to go about it a little more slowly and maybe trust myself more. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, that's great. I think that there are many fit pros that go along that route, that they get a lot of certifications at first, and sometimes you just got to take a step step back to, okay, let me apply some of this. Let me work through it, trust in myself. I think there's a lot of people. That's great that you shared that, because looking at where you started, how you got into the industry, and then what you're doing now, I think there's no way really you could have seen that kind of path that you made for yourself. There's
Right.
no way that you'd be like, okay, I already have a full-time job. I'm going to start this side hustle. There's no way that you'd be like, okay, I'm going to be working for Yogafit down the road and I'll be doing that full time. So it's good that you share that, because often fit pros, and I think that's one of the things that as an industry we have to work on, is trying to find ways to keep people a part of the industry, to make it a living situation for them. Because when you start off, you don't know that it's not a 9 to 5. It's not a 40 hours easily given to you. It's really hard to get to those points. So it's great that you shared that. With now looking back, and this is a question that it's always great to hear from different fit pros. Did you have any mentors along the way?
So another interesting question. I don't really think I can say I had mentors aside from Yogafit trainers.
Mm-hmm.
They, and I guess I can say we are willing to, to spend time with people who ask,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, anytime I lead a training, I send a follow-up email and I say, hey, remember, I'm a contact. I'm a resource for you. So if you have questions about any of this, please feel free to reach back. And people do that. And I took advantage of that. I would reach out to a trainer who I had resonated with. So really the Yogafit family, those people were my mentors, I'd have to say. And I do feel honored from time to time when someone who I've trained in the past, might even be several years ago, they say, hey, you were my trainer for this training back in this, back here. And I have a couple of questions, and you talked about having a business in your home. Do you mind answering some questions? I'm happy to do that kind of stuff.
That's great.
So, we have to mentor each other,
Yeah.
right? And something else I'll mention is that people need business knowledge, right? I have a business background. I have a business degree. And so for me, taking on that business wasn't too scary. Mm-hmm. But for others, I think sometimes fit pros like to think, oh, this will be I'm going to start my own business, but not have any business acumen. Yeah. So in that situation, I would look for a business mentor. Mm-hmm. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's just a fitness career mentor, but a business mentor.
Oh, yeah. I think that's great advice. That's really solid advice for individuals that are potentially at a facility and they are looking, exactly like how you mentioned, to start their own. What are those steps? What do you need to plan for? I think sometimes people will just go from assuming that, okay, I have all these clients, they're just going to come with me. There's a good chance that they're not. They're very comfortable with where they're at, and getting another trainer, there's a chance that they might already had a different trainer at that facility. So it's one of those things where you got to have somebody to guide you, give you a little advice, to maybe give you a different perspective. So I think that's very useful advice. With now, as we're starting to wrap up this podcast episode, can you give the listeners any updates on future trainings with Yogafit?
Oh yeah, we have virtual trainings going on all the time. Mm-hmm. And so you can go to yogafit.com and go to train, and then type in a training that you're looking for. So let's say you maybe were interested in personal trainers. So in the search field, just put personal trainers, and then any virtual personal training date that we've got on our calendar will show up. We also we're moving back into in-person trainings. Yay, finally. So you can also put in your zip code and see where a Yogafit training will be near you. Now in the Phoenix area, we have a Scottsdale conference coming up July 14th through the 18th. And so if you put in, Phoenix, you'll get all the trainings that are going to be at that Scottsdale conference.
Very nice. Awesome. And where can listeners find you online or even Yogafit? Can you share your social media handles?
Yeah. So Yogafit's social media is at Yogafit Inc. At Yogafit INC. And then I am at Energy Kim.
Energy Kim.
At Energy Kim. Yeah.
Perfect. And is that on Facebook and Instagram?
Yes, both.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Kim, thank you for coming on the FitnessFest podcast. A lot of great stuff. It was great to chat with you about your story within the industry, Yogafit, and then also advice for trainers. That's one of my favorite parts, is just industry professionals sharing their journey, advice, because we could all just take a piece of it, apply it ourselves, and move on. Thank you, Kim, for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Have a great day.